Hello everyone, welcome to video 10 in the AP Computer Science Introduction to Java video series. Today we're going to talk about the topic of using methods. So I'll explain what a method is in Java, but it's just like a function in math. So I'll first start with a review of functions in math, just 2 minutes on something you've already learned, because Java methods are really based on that concept, and even some of the notation looks the same as math functions. In fact, some computer languages actually call these functions instead of methods. Secondly, there are 5 methods of the math class that you need to know for the test, and we'll go through all 5 of those. And lastly, I'm going to show you something called Javadoc, which is basically documentation on Java methods, at least the methods that come standard and the classes that come standard with the Java library. Okay, and then the concept of methods is this. You remember this principle DRI, don't repeat yourself. So the concept is that you write code once and you never copy and paste it into other places. Well, the main approach that Java supports that allows you to do this is methods. So essentially like math.square root we used once. The concept is that you write that code once. The square root algorithm is kind of complicated. You have one programmer write that, get it to be fast, bug-free, easy to read, just perfect code. But you just do that in one place. And then the thousands of programs that need to use that, they don't have their own copy of square root. They just call this method. So this is really kind of the granddaddy of solutions to the do not repeat yourself principle, is putting everything into a method. So you can imagine, I've heard the software that runs airplanes is about 10 million lines of code. And you can imagine in thousands of places throughout that software, they need to calculate the square root. And so in all these different programs, they don't calculate the square root. They just call this one method, math.square root, and that does all the work. You pass in a number, get back the square root of that number. So a nice clean interface, nice black box. You don't care how it works, you don't know how it works, but it just works for you. So that's the concept, that you have thousands and thousands of programs that can use a method, but the method is only written in one place. So this video we're going to talk about using methods that are provided by somebody else, like the math class. And then next video we're going to talk about writing our own methods, and essentially the same principle. How do you write something once and then use it multiple times? So let's start out with math functions. So I'm not going to talk about programming here, just math, and you've already done this in your math class, no doubt, but just a 1-minute reminder. So function of x is x squared plus 1. You probably recognize this notation. The f is the function name. So in math it's usually single letters like f and g and h, but you'll see in computer science we want longer names for functions. X is called the input. And then this equation is the output, basically the calculation you should make. So if you recall the notation, like f of 1, you take the 1, you replace it for x everywhere in the equation, and 1 squared plus 1 is 2. F of 3, you take the 3, you put it here, 3 squared plus 1 is 10. So that's your kind of normal notation. If you recall, you can also nest these things. So the way you do function of 2 is you first do the internal. So function of 2 is 5. And then you do function of 5, which is 26. Okay, so in math you can nest them. You remember, I think they're called composite functions, f of g of x kind of thing. And then functions can also, we didn't do this in math a lot, but you'll see it in computer science plenty. Function could take 2 inputs. So function of x and y is x squared plus y squared, let's say. So if you had function of minus 2 and 3, that would be 4 plus 9, or is that right? 13. Okay? So that's pretty simple, but you'll see Java methods are essentially equivalent to this. You have a function name, you have an input, which is provided in the parentheses, and then you have some logic, like an equation, and when you call that function, you get back the answer from that equation, or the answer from whatever the method wants to send you back. Okay? So now let's go to the computer and we'll go through the 5 methods of the math class so you can kind of get a feel for how they work. Okay, so you see I've actually typed in all the code so you don't have to watch me type. And I put these 2 slashes in front. What that means is a single line comment in Java. So it basically ignores the rest of the line whenever you do that. So the first function in the math class is called absolute value. So math.abs is the name of the function. And there's an integer version of it where you send an integer and you get an integer back. And there's a double version of it, but essentially it acts the same. In Java you have to write 2 different copies. Okay, so let's use an example. So let's say you set, we're going to do 2 test cases here. You set one variable equal to -7, you set y equal to 8, and then you do a new variable called abs x, which is basically the absolute value of x. So what this is going to do, it's going to call that function, call that method. The method name is longer than in math. It's called math.abs. It's going to pass in the value of x, which is -7. It's going to get an answer back, which is 7, and it's going to stick that answer in this box, in this new variable. We're going to do the same thing for 8. Okay, so now we're going to just show our 2 results. And the way I like to show things that I'm testing is I like to show the value that it should be, so I remember it's doing it right, and then I show the value of the variable. So that should be 7, and that should be 8. So it should have turned the -7 into an 8. Let's just take a quick look. Okay, you can see that worked out. Okay, so that's how absolute value works. Now this may be one of my more boring videos, but we'll just cover the material. Okay, so now we're going to do some doubles. So -4.32, 9.124, and we'll just print out the values. You can see in this case I'm not actually sticking the answer into a variable. I'm just using it in an expression to pass to this method, printline method. So basically 4 should equal, not 4, 4.32 should equal the absolute value of A, right? So it's just going to call this method, get an answer, take that answer, concatenate it with this string, pass that to printline, and show it to the screen. And then same thing here, math, absolute value B, that should remain unchanged at that value. So let's take a look. Compile, run, there we go, looking good. Okay, so that's 2 of the functions of math class, both absolute value. The next one is power, or POW, and basically this takes 2 arguments. The first argument, let me make that a little bolder. First argument is the base, and the second argument is the exponent. So this is 2 to the 4th. 2 to the 4th should be 16. Okay, so that should come out to 16. So here's a case where a method takes 2 arguments, which is not too complicated. You just put them in the parentheses like that. And the second thing is 2 to the -1. If you recall, that moves it to the denominator. So that'd be 1 over 2 to the 1, or 1/2, or 0.5. So let's take a look. 16.5. Okay, looking good so far. So that's the third method. The fourth and fifth you've already seen. So the square root, math.sqrt, we'll take the square root of that number. That should be a 4. Let's just check it out. And it is. Good. And then lastly, the random method. This is something you don't actually do in math, but you do here, which is sometimes a method will not take any arguments. It doesn't need anything to do its work. And random is like that. So essentially random, you still have to put the parentheses. That tells Java to execute the function, to call the function. So it calls this function math.random. If you recall, that will return a number between 0 and 1. We'll just show that number, see if a number from 0 to 1 comes up. And it does, 0.8678. Since that's random, it should come up with a different number the next time we run it, and it does, 0.6609. Okay? So that is the magic of using methods. That's one of the simpler things we'll do. But these are the 5 methods you need to know for the math class. So remember those: absolute value, power, POW, square root, and random. The last thing I wanted to show you on the computer, at least, is Javadoc.
And what happens is when anybody writes a Java program, they document it in this tool called Javadoc. So if you wanted to learn all about the math class, you just type into Google Javadoc Math, and you will see things like this. Oracle currently owns the Java environment, so you click on that, and you're going to see this is the class math, a bunch of information about the class, and then for this purpose you want to go down to Method Summary, and here you can see all the methods of the math class in alphabetical order. So you can see the ABS, absolute value method, but you can see arc cosine, arc sine, cosine, e to the something, so minimum of two numbers, maximum, power, this is the one that you need to know, random, oh, random int, I didn't know that. That would be useful. So you can, to radians, tangent, okay, square root, you can see that one. So, and then if you click on any of these, so power, let's say, you can go down and it gives an explanation of how it does its work. So here's round, how it rounds, etc. So that's a really great reference. You'll find once you get started with Java, you'll be using Javadoc a lot to see how different things work. And this is useful if you'd like. The math class is very useful. Lots of good methods for you to do some work with math. Okay, so now let's do a quick recap and then we'll be done.
Okay, not the most exciting topic, but one that we do need to cover, which is how methods work, what they are. So they're just like math functions. That's the best way to think about them from a starting point. They'll get a little bit more advanced later, but you put in an input, you get an output back, like the result of a math calculation. We covered the 5 methods of the math class you need to know, as well as how to find things in Java, how methods work, Googling Javadoc and whatever class you want. So here are the 5 methods. Absolute value takes 1 argument and returns the absolute value of it. Power takes 2 arguments, the base and the exponent, so like 3 to the 3 to the second or 3 to the fourth. Square root takes 1 argument, so you pass in a number and the square root comes back. And then random takes no arguments and returns a number between 0 and 1. And the result of those method calls you can put into variables. Basically they're expressions, so you can put into a variable. You can just send them somewhere else, like to print line, which we typically did. You can actually nest them. I didn't do an example of that, but you could do the math.square root of 16. So that would take the square root of 16, which is 4, and then take the square root of 4, which is 2. So that whole nesting would return 2. So you can nest those as well, just like I did in the math example. So that's it. I hope that was exciting enough, and I'll talk to you next time.